Hello, my name is Rainer Kaasik-Kaaslov, and I am the author of tabletop role-playing game Sorcerers, Adventurers, Kings and Economics, shortly SAKA. The basic edition of the game can be freely downloaded from the links below, and this is what we'll be using today. But when you want more, then the full rules will be available after Kickstarter campaign, which will open in the start of April. Also, link below. Today, we take a look at the domain building rules and build a simple domain ready for play. This sample also can be downloaded from link below. Saka's domain sheet is 8 pages, so it can be frightening at first. But don't worry, everything is pretty straightforward. Also, if not building a domain for players to use, then it can serve as a world building tool for GM to visualize one kingdom, republic, whatever type of state that your campaign takes place. It helps to organize the size, how many people live there, who are the interest or power groups, aka the factions, how large is its army, its tax base, and so on. So, what's the center of Saka's domain system? People, the inhabitants of domain. People are basically the only resource players as domain rulers will be managing. They are the ones paying taxes, they form the base of army, and also some groups of them can become the player's most dangerous and troublesome rivals. So everything in domain system is about people. On other note, domain system describes a type of economic system that we call Asteanic caste capitalism or Asteanic bureaucracy, which is partly inspired by East European early modern serfdom and economic systems, and partly by 17th and 18th century Japan. But let's get right into it. The empty domain sheet can be downloaded from the link inside the basic rules book, and the example domain as we decided from this video. We start with a simple map. For the example, I use one of the Asteanic world areas, but really you can just draw some lines for rivers, coast, mountains, and that would be good enough. More details can also be filled later when players build their forts, new villages, and etc. The first important thing for the starters is to decide the size of hexes, because one 4 square kilometer hex accommodates one typical village with its hinterlands. So 16 square kilometer hex would accommodate 4 villages, and 64 square kilometer hex 16 villages. That's the maximum villages in one hex. So on this example map we go with 64 square kilometer hexes. Next thing to decide is the soil's fertility ties, which goes from 0 for deserts and such to D12 for the most ideal soils with irrigation systems. This example domain is in harsh northern climate with rocky lands, so the lowlands fertility ties in here is only D6, highlands D4, and mountains 0 or nothing. You can't grow, you can make fields there just as that. Next to mineral resources, that you can just decide or also roll. And even if you decide there are no known resources at the game start, they can be found later. And with that, we are done with the map for now. Now comes the question, is the domain part of some larger state, vassal of the other domain, or is it completely independent? Those things will really depend on your campaign. Do you want your players to have to deal with some overlord who could be helpful or unhelpful at times? or do you want them to be completely independent? And to population we go. Let's start with tenant villages and production villages. The book gives some estimates for population density in the Estonic world, which are a bit lower than our world population density in early modern times, because the creatures of the other world and the unfriendly nature gods that also live in Estonic world. But for but for comparison, North Tehna population density compares somewhat with the Scandinavia or Scotland, and Tefna grasslands somewhat with Korea or Japan in early modern times, but this bit lower. As our example domain is in far north in extremely mountainous area, we will go with even lower number of villages, only one village per 100 square kilometers, so 64 villages. You don't have to mark all those villages on the map, but of course you can if you want. In this example, I have done it just to visualize it better. As you can see, I placed all villages in the D6 fertility dice area and next to water because of the fishing opportunities. The other areas with the D4 fertility dice are almost empty. We will come back to those villages later. Next, freeman households. Those are your blacksmiths, millers, small-time merchants, tavern keepers, rich landowners and farmers. In the Estonic world, approximately 25% of people belong to this caste, which means that for every village there will be around 8 of this sort of households. With 64 villages, it will be 512 freeman households. Now, depending how you want it, but 50% of these freemen could form a city or town communities. In our example, we keep it simple, and instead of cities or towns, we say that there are large village clusters in Lakeville area, and some of them live in the Windfort, which will be the so-called capital of the domain, or really just a fortified house where PCs live. Next, the nobility. There can be 4 different types of nobles. First, the land aristocracy. 1 family per 10 villages in domain. So, 6 families in our example. But each of those families own 4 of those previously mentioned villages and retain their own samurai and ashigaru, like the rulers of the domain. Now we see that the rulers will only hold 40 villages, and 24 of those 64 villages are held by different nobles. Of course, if you want in your campaign, you can say that instead of 6 different noble families, there is only one large and powerful noble clan with all of this land. This could be more interesting for PCs to manage. Next group of nobles are licensed merchants. Those are merchants who own large ships and trade with faraway land. Very rich and powerful on their own right, but they still have to pay taxes to Lord who gave them their license. Those licenses come from emperors or large states. In this small domain here, there could live 1 or 2 of those families, but they will not be taxed from the domain ruler. For productors and patricians, this domain is also too small, and that's good for the domain rulers, to be honest. Okay, time to count everybody together. 60,000 farmers, 5,120 freeman families, and 120 nobles. Total population of 21,220 people. And from population number we can see that the domain has a size of 1. Consular actions per term 1. Price multiplier also 1. Base corruption 50%. base prosperity 0, base discontent 50%, and base time of troubles 30%. Now, to understand how much taxes we collect from villages, we have to decide which type of villages they are. Let's go down to the establishment subchapter. We know that the land fertility is only D6, so D8, D10 and D12 type of villages are automatically out. We can choose between tenant villages, military villages and production villages. Production villages would give us the best tax income in this situation, but their population can't be used for corvée tax, which is a tax by work, used in early modern and medieval societies to build things and take care of lords' fields. Military villages give the most soldiers, but don't give any tax or corvée at all. We go with a mix, 15, 15 and 10. Next, the domain military. The sample domain will only have feudal samurai companies that will come from the villages. Those are the same samurai bureaucrats that serve as tax collectors, teachers and villager heads, accompanied by tenant Ashigaru, who are farmers by trade. 15 military villages convents to exactly one company, or 120 soldiers. 25 other villages convents to 75 soldiers. That can be used to force smaller companies when we adjust the company size. No professional army at the start, as that costs a lot of money and such a small domain wouldn't have enough for it. Now, other military forces in domain. Our land aristocracy has a small army of 72 soldiers, also samurai and Ashigaru. Those come from the 24 villages they own. And the largest force is the potential militia, 1 soldier per freeman household, altogether 512 soldiers. Those numbers can be good or bad for the rulers, because as you can see right now, domain subjects could theoretically organize an army 3 times the size of their ruler. Next, the domain chancellors and domestic politics. So, the domain has a ruler and chancellors. How they relate to each other, is it monarchy, republic, temple lands and something else, is really not important here. Just that that one of them is named ruler and the other are chancellors. Domain has 4 percentages, and big part of the domain game is managing those percentages. Corruption, prosperity, discontent, and time of travels. Each domain turn, which is 3 months, those percentages are rolled, and when the roll falls inside of the percentage, an event happens. As you can imagine, the corruption events are mostly bad, and the prosperity ones good. But not only so. Solving events successfully can earn extra skill ranks, basically exp, for chancellors and sometimes gives some other bonuses. So if this is a player's domain, then probably one of them is the ruler and the other are chancellors. And the other chancellor slots can be filled with hired NPCs or left just empty for small domains. Also, each chancellor has their type of actions. For ruler or chancellors to take these types of actions, respective offices must be established. Those offices represent the real bureaucrats working to fill the chancellor's orders. And people working there belong to mostly the samurai caste in the Astanic world. So, let's fill it up. Let's say there are 5 players. One of them will be ruler, others will be strategist, court wizard, chief shinobi, and archpriest. For land magistrate and high magistrate, they hire NPCs. Sea magistrate is not needed, as not much trade happens in such a small domain. For simplicity's sake, let's say all the PCs have their governing skills +5, and the higher domain chancellors always start out with their governing skills +10. And let's fill it up. And done. Now let's go a bit further in the basic rules book and look at the factions in the domain. Those will come up in the domain events rolled from the percentages and may become players' allies or rivals. At the start of the game, let's just count them down, which fractions exists, and place them all under the neutral category. We have two NPC chancellors, no separate archpriest as this post is filled with a BC. Nature god is a faction. Let's say the domain has one. No patricians, but land aristocracy. No productors, licensed merchants, or orders or large cities at the start, but samurai, ashigaru, and free landowners. No syndicates, as there are no large cities. Also, free tenants, people who live in the production villages, and tenants, sheriffs in regular villages and in military villages. Small people, because there are always poor and less fortunate everywhere. No slaves or forced labor. So, all those factions start out neutral and may change to friendly or rival depending on the events rolled and the player actions, or just how campaign plays out. You could start out the game with the local nobles as player rivals, for example, or a local nature god hating them. As for establishments, for simplicity's sake, our starting domain will start out almost empty. Let's just add road network, unpaved, and large fortified house for player space. And as the map has some border towers, so 4 small towers also. Let the players build up their domain themselves, how they see fit. And we have arrived to the balance sheet. As we didn't add any establishments, our only income is the taxes. 1,250 gold denarii from villages, 5,120 from free households, and 450 from nobles. As we see, most of our income comes from taxing the freeman households, but most of our army comes from rural samurai villages. Altogether, potential revenue 6,820 gold denarii, minus corruption percentage 35. Total 4,433 gold denarii. Expenses. We have 6 offices established. In this situation, the Council of Temples shouldn't be free, as the player character Archpriest is the only priest in the domain in such a case. So, multiplied by 6, altogether 1,200. We have 2 NPC chancellors who want salaries, 100 both. And as we haven't established anything else, then that's all for now. Altogether 1,400 gold denarii. With that, the domain is almost done. Only domains Otherworld and Nature God has to be done. But those aspects of the game you don't have to touch at all if you don't want to. For creating the domain Otherworld and the Nature God, we will use random generators. Those are not in the basic rules book, but will be available in the full rules book after the Kickstarter. For the Otherworld, we roll d6 9 times. For the nature and description, we roll 2 and reads. This pocket of the Otherworld mirrors the geography of the human world, but with distinct characteristics attributed to the governing deity or mimics a different era of the whole human world. Alternatively, it reflects the conditions that would exist in the human world without the presence of humans. Or it might be completely empty, covered in ice or similar. This pocket is a moderate size, resembling a specific region or a large country in the human world. So, it's a cold mountainous area, just without living humans. For the ways to access Otherworld, we roll 4, which means astral projection roll against the difficulty level 30 to go to other world when leaving the body as soul. Also, there is an alternative physical entry point. Let's say it's a cave that needs full moon to the portal to open. For atmosphere, we roll 3, which means the pocket atmosphere mirrors that of the human world in the terms of day and night cycle. Seasons occur, along with winds, storms, rain, and so on. Someone entering the other world might not immediately grasp that they are no longer in the human realm. The only differences could be subtle, like the absence of bird songs or other minor anomalies. Of course, other unusual occurrences might provide further hints. For space and time in the other world we roll 1 and 6, which means that the space is closely correlated with the human world, but the time doesn't move at all in the other world compared to the human world. Those two things together make this area and domain really interesting to play for astral warriors and assassins, as they can move long distances and appear only after a few seconds, almost like teleporting, but using the other world to move. For notable places, we roll 4, which means that in this pocket there is a meeting place for gods or other worldlings. Let's come back to it later. For inhabitants, we also roll 4, which makes the pocket very dangerous to travel. In this pocket, an ongoing struggle for existence occurs amongst ancestral spirits as they share their space with certain soul-eating otherworldlings that prey on them. So, coming back to the meeting place, the soul-eating otherworldlings come together from otherworld pockets to hunt in here. Also, the idea of using the pocket for teleportation doesn't sound so good idea anymore. Doable, but dangerous, as those creatures will definitely follow you to human world. For notable items or persons, we roll 6, which means that there is a god imprisoned in the other world. As we decided that the domain will have a nature god, let that nature god be imprisoned in the other world. For the ruler of the pocket, we roll 3, which means that the pocket has a powerful entity that thinks itself as a ruler, but really doesn't have any control over it. That really fits with the imprisoned god. So the domain nature god is imprisoned in the other world, thinks of itself as its ruler, but don't control the other world. So let's generate the nature god. As the region is mountainous and so is its other world, let's choose the god's portfolio to be mountain god, and red Oni would be suitable base creature. And let's get rolling. Again, we roll 9 times, d6, and personality 4. God enjoys human servitude. They require plentiful sacrifices and more temples to be built, which need to be grander and taller than the last. The god might want constant flow of humans to entertain them in the other world. This one makes the god pretty interesting to manage. Appearance 2, so just large red Oni. The dwelling place we know, it's imprisoned in other world, but let's roll still. And we get 6, which means that the god's dwelling is unknown. So it's imprisoned in other world, but the place of the prison is hidden in some way. God can only be connected by prayers. And for God's influence, we roll 3, which means that the god attracts a lot of pilgrims and influences the domain this way. The influence of domain culture mainly stems from hosting pilgrims and commercializing their god. Seems fitting enough. God's obsession 4, which means this god really likes sacrifices. maybe even human sacrifices time to time. When friendly, influence when friendly, 3 plus 10% prosperity. When you get God into the friendly factions list. God's dislikes. Dislikes specific activities like hunting, fishing, farming, something like that. May dislike certain establishments. For mountain god, mining sounds fitting, so our god will not like mining or mines, which means no building of mines in this domain or the god will get angry. And god influence on domain when angered, we roll 2 plus 10 time of troubles. So if the rulers find gold and want to mine it, they have to make a choice, as time of troubles means plagues and famine. But the ways to appropriate the angered deity. 5. God is almost unforgiving. Domain high priest must throw celebrations costing of 10,000 gold to appropriate them. A priest who has made an error against God to boost must offer a human sacrifice, build a huge, grandiose temple, or do something equally difficult. As for God rivals, nothing has really came up, and so we just leave it empty now. Spells attainable, typical tasks, and taboos for the priest can be found in the sorcery module, and I just quickly fill them up. So, that's all. Domain is ready for play. Again, if you are interested in Sorcerers, Adventures, Kings and Economics tabletop role-playing game, then the basic rules can be downloaded freely. Links below, and if you are interested in the full rules and would like to see it in print, then Kickstarter link is also in video description. The Kickstarter opens at April, but you can subscribe to the pre-launch page to get the notification when that happens. Thank you for watching and have a great day.